Hello, dear friends and enthusiasts of history, engineering, and military secrets. Before you dive into this text, I need to ask you for one important thing. If you, like me, are fascinated by forgotten technological races, wonder weapons that could have changed everything but didn't, and the dramatic stories of engineering genius put in the service of war, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what other secret weapons of the past you would like to learn about. Your opinion and interest are the fuel for new research and stories. Now get ready. We are about to embark on a journey through the labyrinths of metal, ballistics, and human ingenuity. We will solve the mystery of the guns that fired backwards. No, it was even more cunning. Their barrels tapered, and it was both brilliant and insane. The story you are about to read is not just dry facts. It is the story of how one simple idea almost turned the battlefields of World War II upside down but was buried under the weight of scarcity, espionage, and the relentless logic of total war. Make yourself comfortable. This will be a long, but I promise captivating tale. The barrel that squeezes the future. Imagine for a moment that you are a weapons engineer somewhere in the early 20th century. Before you lies an eternal, age-old task. How to make a shell or bullet fly faster, farther, and hit harder? The formula, in general terms, is simple. You need energy. A lot of energy. It comes from the propellant charge. But just adding more gunpowder is a dead end. Recoil increases, the barrel bursts, the weapon becomes too heavy to lift. You need a clever, elegant method. And then one day, someone looks at an ordinary barrel, a straight cylinder, and asks a blasphemous question. What if it were not straight but tapering? Like a rocket engine nozzle, but in reverse. The idea is dazzling in its simplicity. Imagine not a pipe, but a cone. A projectile, pushed by propellant gases, enters the wide part and begins to move toward the narrow one. The space for the gases behind it decreases, and the pressure, you can't cheat the laws of physics, rapidly builds. The projectile, like a piston in a pump, receives an increasingly powerful and constant push along its entire path down the barrel. The muzzle velocity increases by 30, 40, even 50%, with the exact same propellant charge and the same external dimensions of the gun. Seemed like magic, a dream, but, like any dream, when attempted to be realized, it turned into an engineering nightmare. Imagine a rifled barrel, and rifling is needed to stabilize the projectile in flight, which also smoothly, with microscopic precision, tapers along its entire length. Manufacturing such a thing in an era when even CNC lathes were unheard of was practically impossible. The cost was exorbitant, the lifespan negligible. It seemed like a dead end. And then came the second epiphany. Why make the entire barrel both tapered and rifled? Let's divide the duties. The first, larger part of the barrel, classic, cylindrical, with rifling. It imparts the spin. The second, final part, just a smooth, conical adapter that will accelerate the projectile to unimaginable speeds. The task for technologists is still hellish, but now solvable. Thus, the concept of a gun with a tapered bore was born. But that was only half of the puzzle. The other half lay in the ammunition crate. An ordinary shell crammed into such a barrel would simply get stuck or blow it up on the first shot. A special round was needed, one capable of compressing, like an orange peel in a fist. The driving bands, those very protrusions that bite into the rifling, had to be soft, malleable, and the core hard and narrow. As it moved through the cone, the soft sheath would be swaged down, tightly adhering to the walls, preventing gases from rushing ahead, while the thin, heavy core, like an arrow shot from a crossbow, flew toward the target with monstrous kinetic energy. It was a symbiosis of weapon and ammunition, an inseparable duo. And behind the scenes of this drama stood people whose names became legends in narrow circles. The founding fathers, Gerlich, Puff, and the race for speed. The story of tapered barrels cannot be told without Hermann Gerlich. This German engineer became its main prophet and martyr. But before him was Karl Puff, who as early as 1907 patented a bullet with a compressible leading section. The idea was in the air. However, it was Gerlich in the late 1920s who perfected it, creating his famous sporting rifle. The figures he demonstrated were mind-boggling. A bullet of just 7 millimeters caliber, accelerated in his tapered barrel, flew out at a speed of about 1,700 meters per second. For comparison, an ordinary rifle bullet of that time flew at a speed of 7 to 800 meters per second. Energy increased exponentially. During tests from 50 meters, his bullet pierced 12 millimeters of steel armor, an unthinkable result for small arms. But Germany in the late 1920s was not the best place for a weapons genius. The political winds were blowing toward Nazism, and Gerlich, a man apparently far from their ideas or simply a pragmatist, chose to leave. First to England and then, in 1930, to the USA, the mecca of inventors and entrepreneurs. There, in alliance with American gunsmith James Gray, he created the Gerlich Gray rifle. Tests in 1932 were a triumph. A bullet weighing 6.35 of a gram reached a speed of 1,760 meters per second. This record for small-caliber bullets, by the way, still stands. Gerlich's genius received international recognition. And what about the USSR? Soviet specialists, always closely watching Western novelties, also obtained samples or drawings of the Gerlich carbine. They tested it and refused. The verdict was harsh and in the spirit of the times. Too complex for mass production under conditions of a possible war. A country betting on millions of simple and reliable Mosin rifles and later SVTs could not afford such technological frills. This decision, by the way, will become the leitmotif of our story. Genius versus technological and resource availability. While the world admired rifles, the military was already looking further. If such technology so increases the power of a bullet, what would it do to a shell? Thus began the path to the cannon. World premieres. Denmark, England, and Soviet experiments. The irony of fate is that the first artillery systems with a tapered bore were created not by the Germans, but by the Danes. The firm Schultz and Larsen, known for its high-precision rifles, no later than 1937, developed for the French army an anti-tank gun, the Canon de 29/20mm anti-char Larsen. The numbers in the name speak for themselves. The barrel tapered from 29 to 20 millimeters. The gun was light. It was even planned for use by airborne troops. By May 1940, only about 50 pieces had been made. But the phony war ended for France in a swift defeat, and these guns sank into oblivion without even having time to really be photographed. Only 1 or 2 vague shots remain. Their fate is a metaphor for the entire concept. A brilliant idea that appeared on the eve of a catastrophe, without time to prove itself. The British approached the matter with their inherent practicality. Why build a whole new barrel? Let's make a removable tapered adapter. Thus appeared the Littlejohn adapter for their widely used 2-pounder, about 40 millimeters anti-tank guns. The adapter was, in essence, a consumable. It lasted for several dozen shots, after which it was replaced. Cheap and cheerful. From 1942, such devices were installed on guns in armored vehicles, for example, on light Tetrarch tanks and Daimler Scout cars. It was a smart, elegant solution that extended the life of the obsolete 2-pounder. But by mid-war, both it and its adapter could no longer cope with the new German tanks. The arms race marched on. The USSR, as I mentioned, experimented before the war, but to no avail. Success came only after it, in 1947, when the design bureau of the famous Vasily Graben copied a captured German gun and created their own S-40 76/57mm caliber. But the time had already passed. Classic anti-tank artillery was being replaced by shape-charge ammunition and rockets. The S-40 did not go into series, remaining a museum exhibit and evidence of the post-war study of German secrets. And now we come to the main characters of our drama, the Wehrmacht and its wonder guns. The German menagerie, from heavy rifle to tank hunter. When on June 22, 1941, German troops crossed the border of the USSR, their arsenal already contained 183 unusual weapons. The 2.8 centimeters Schwer Panzerbuchs 41. Disputes over whether it is a rifle or a gun continue to this day. The Germans called it a heavy anti-tank rifle, but by weight, about 200 kilograms, and the use of a gun carriage, it was a real light gun. Its barrel tapered from 28 to 20 millimeters. It was with this caliber 28 millimeters that the combat career of tapered bores in the Wehrmacht began. The weapon turned out to be phenomenally effective against lightly armored targets. Soviet T-26, BT, T-60 armored cars, at close ranges, up to 500 meters. Its armor-piercing core, accelerated to an incredible speed, opened up armor like a tin can. It was loved by the troops for its accuracy, low profile, and mobility. It was produced until 1943, with almost 2,800 pieces made. And tellingly, even after being officially removed from production and supply, it fought until May 1945, including street battles in Berlin. There are even known cases where experienced crews managed to knock out medium T-34 tanks with the S.B.41, hitting the sides or rear, and in Berlin, even the lower frontal plate of the gigantic IS-2, though this is more the exception that proves the desperate bravery of the crew. The next step was the 4.2 cm Panzerjägerkanon 41, Pak 41, caliber, 40.3 mm at the entrance, 29 at the exit. This was already a full-fledged anti-tank gun on the carriage of the famous 37 mm Pak 35/36. Few of them were produced, only about 300 pieces from December 1941 to May 1942. They remained in the shadow of their more famous sisters, and there is little information about their use. There are photos from the Italian front, where they armed paratrooper divisions. By 1944, almost none were left. And finally, the queen of the battlefield and the pinnacle of engineering thought in this class, the 7.5 cm Panzerjägerkanon 41. Here she is, that formidable beauty, the barrel tapered from 75 to 55 mm. With dimensions comparable to the standard 75 mm Pak 40, it had phenomenal armor penetration. At a distance of 500 meters, its tungsten core shell penetrated about 140 millimeters of homogeneous armor. This meant it could hit any tank of the anti-Hitler coalition frontally at medium range. It was feared. It was respected. From April to May 1942, the firm Krupp manufactured only 150 of these wonder guns. And this is the key number. 150. A drop in the ocean of the Eastern Front. Why? To answer this question, we need to descend from the command post and enter the workshop, and then the office of the strategist responsible for resources. Anatomy of a failure. Why genius lost the war. So we have a weapon of incredible effectiveness. Why wasn't it put into mass production? Why didn't they flood all defensive lines with them? The answer lies in three planes: technology, economics, resources. And the last one is the most important. 1. Technology and lifespan. The main myth is about the extremely low barrel life. For the 7.5 cm Pak 41, it was 500 rounds. Is that a lot or a little? The debate continues. On one hand, many anti-tank guns died along with their crews without firing even 100 shots. On the other, in conditions of positional defense, a gun could serve for a long time. But the Germans were pragmatists. The barrel design of the Pak 41 was modular. A long rifled part, 75 mm caliber, and a removable conical adapter, 75/55 mm. The adapter wore out mainly, could be replaced in the field. This smart solution refutes the thesis of unacceptably low lifespan. 2. Economics. Yes, these guns were expensive. Let's compare in Reichsmarks. 2.8 cm S.E. B.41. 4,520. 4.2 cm Pak 41. 7,800. 7.5 cm Pak 41. 15,000. Now for comparison. 3.7 cm Pak 36. 5,730. 5 cm Pak 38. 10,600. 7.5 cm Pak 40. 12,000. Yes, the Pak 41 is 3,000 marks more expensive than the Pak 40. But it was also more effective against heavy tanks in 1942, 1943. In a war for survival, overpaying for quality is often justified. So it's not just about money. 3. Resources. The fatal tungsten. Here it is, the Achilles heel of the entire project. The core of the armor-piercing shell for tapered guns had to be not just steel. It had to be small, very dense, and maintain strength under monstrous loads. The ideal material, tungsten carbide. Hard, heavy, perfect. And now, a cold shower of reality. Nazi Germany had no significant tungsten deposits of its own. Its main world sources were in China, Portugal, Spain, Brazil. And here another quiet but deadly war came into play: economic and intelligence. British intelligence, SOE, and American intelligence agencies launched a grand operation to deprive Germany of strategic raw materials. They bought up all available tungsten on the world market, even at inflated prices, pressured neutral countries, primarily Portugal and Spain, threatening a blockade. This operation was one of the most brilliant and little-known successes of the Allies. By the end of 1943, Germany had exhausted its meager tungsten reserves. What did this mean for the Pak-41? Everything. Attempts to make the core from ordinary steel turned the Wonder Gun into a pumpkin. Armor penetration fell by half, negating all its advantages over the simpler and cheaper Pak-40. Shell production stopped. The guns, left without special ammunition, became useless pieces of iron. They began to be withdrawn from the front and put into storage. By March 1945, out of 150 produced 75mm Pak-41s, only 3 remained in service. Another 8 were gathering dust in warehouses. A tragic end for a technological masterpiece. The unfulfilled dreams of the Reich. What was planned but could not be. German engineers, intoxicated by the possibilities of the concept, sketched even more fantastic pictures in their design bureaus. There were projects for a whole family of anti-tank guns, Gerät, device of 40mm caliber. A tank gun, Gerät 725, was developed for a prospective heavy tank. But the most mind-blowing project was the super-heavy anti-aircraft gun Gerät 65F with a 150mm caliber. Imagine a smooth tapered barrel, a fin-stabilized shell, muzzle velocity 1,200 meters per second, ceiling 18 kilometers. It would have been a nightmare for Allied strategic bombers. But barrel life, only 86 rounds. And the cost and resource intensity, astronomical. The project remained on paper, but, like many German developments, after the war it fell into the hands of the victors. It is no coincidence that in the USSR in the late 40s, experimental anti-aircraft guns KS-29, 85/57mm caliber, and KS-24, 103/76mm, were created, clearly inspired by these ideas. Lessons of history and the ghost of a technological dead end. So what do we have in the end? Were tapered barrels a dead-end branch of weapon evolution? Not entirely. It was a brilliant, ahead-of-its-time idea that ran into the harsh limitations of the material world. It proved that physics can be tricked by clever engineering. But it also proved that war is won not by individual technological wonderwaff, but by reliable, mass-produced, maintainable systems supported by a stable resource base. Germany, creating masterpieces like the Pak-41, resembled an alchemist trying to obtain the philosopher's stone when the country desperately lacked ordinary iron and gasoline. The history of tapered barrels is a parable about the choice of path. The Allies went a different way, developing subcaliber shells which also use a dense core, but in a regular barrel, shape charge ammunition, and later rockets. It was simpler, cheaper, and in the end more effective. But the allure of this idea has not died. It resurfaces in the most modern developments, in theories about electromagnetic railguns, in new hypersonic weapon schemes. The principle of acceleration through constriction continues to excite the minds of engineers. And when I look at rare photos of these guns with their elegant, streamlined barrels, I see not just weapons of destruction. I see a monument to human intellect, its daring attempt to jump above its head. A monument erected on the side of the road of history by the train of war, driven not by lone geniuses, but by millions of tons of steel, oil, and human resources. This story makes one wonder, how many of today's breakthrough technologies will run into the same dead ends? A shortage of rare earth metals, the impossibility of scaling, dependence on global supply chains? Questions worth pondering. That's all, friends. I hope this journey into the world of forgotten technology was as fascinating for you as it was for me. If you have read this far, you are a true enthusiast. And since we are on the same wavelength, write in the comments what you think. Could the mass use of these guns have in any way influenced the course of the war on the Eastern Front? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories ahead about forgotten weapons, secret projects, and turning points in history that are not written about in textbooks. Your activity is a signal that such in-depth topics are needed and important. Thank you for being with us.